Good morning, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order at 9:03 a.m. this morning. Before we get too far into things, just a couple of notes I wanted to touch on. First off, obviously a big announcement earlier this week for the county. I'm just going to read from the release that was put out by McCain. McCain Foods is making the largest one-time global investment in the company's 65-year history right here in Lethbridge County. We are proud to announce $600 million of expansion to our facility in Coaldale that would more than double the size of our facility and workforce. The expansion will create 200 jobs, doubling our existing workforce to more than 485, and is expected to create 2 new state-of-the-art production lines, one for French fry line and one for potato specialty products. Sustainability will be a focus of the expansion, including a water recycling system to be implemented to produce clean potable water to be used in the manufacturing process. We look forward to working with you and your community as we work towards this expansion. So obviously, tremendous news for Lethbridge County and for Southern Alberta as a whole. The economic spin-off for the surrounding communities will be tremendous. Thank you to the Government of Alberta for the work that went into this and securing this historic investment. Thank you to staff for working alongside McCain Foods on this, and now the work starts. So thank you very much and look forward to what comes next. Second thing I wanted to mention was I have an announcement here I'd just like to read. Recently, our Fire Services Manager, Byron Fraser, received an award. Byron received the Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Medal. Lethbridge County would like to congratulate our Fire Services Manager, Byron Fraser, for receiving a Queen Elizabeth II Platinum Jubilee Medal recently. This award is given to the citizens of the United Kingdom and Commonwealth countries who have made a significant impact in their communities. Byron has been the County Fire Services Manager since 2022 and previously served as the Chief of the Barons and District Fire Department, where he was a member for 17 years. So on behalf of Council, Byron, congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I was asked to say a little something. I'm not very good at talking about myself, but it's great appreciative. It's a great honor to be nominated by peers. Been in the industry of serving the community for 20 years will be this fall. So it's a great honor and a little piece to add to the collection and hopefully keep the dedication going moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Byron. Congratulations. Moving down, adoption of the agenda. I have one proposed adoption to the agenda in our closed session. I-1, infrastructure project discussion, FOIP section 24, advice from officials. Are there any other additions or deletions to the agenda? John?
Hey, Mr. Chair, I'd like to move that we adopt the agenda as amended.
Thank you. John has moved to adopt the agenda for the Thursday, March 16th meeting as amended. Any discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Moving down, C, adoption of minutes. County Council meeting minutes of March 2nd, 2023. Are there any errors or omissions that you see in the minutes? Eric.
I'd like to move the minutes of County Council meeting of March 2nd, 2023.
Thank you, Eric. Eric has moved for the adoption of the County Council meeting minutes from March 2nd, 2023. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. If we move down into our agenda, we have one time commitment today. We have a public hearing scheduled for 10 o'clock a.m. With that, why don't we move down then into department reports. Item E1, Community Services. E1.1, Bylaw 23-002, the Country Crossroads Estate Area Structure Plan, and Bylaw 23-003, Land Use Bylaw Amendment, Rural Agriculture to Group Country Residential, first reading. With that, I will throw to our Interim Director of Community Services, Hillary Jensen. Hillary?
Thank you, Council. Today I'm pleased to present to you for first reading only the bylaws 23-002 and 23-003. As mentioned, this is for the Country Crossroads Estate Area Structure Plan and Rezoning. The Area Structure Plan is looking to consider the residential development of a 66-acre parcel for country residential use.
Thank you, Hillary. Open up to council. Any questions? Klaus?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The other acreage that are right there, how long have they been in place?
The other acreages have developed over time since around the early 1980s.
Okay.
So, actually in the report, they did a very good historical overview of this area, so you can see over time, the ones directly to the south, I think, were developed in the early 80s, further to the north in the 90s, in and around there for the rest of them too. The Taylor Business Park was approved in 2014 and has been slowly developing out, but was all, this particular area has been kind of under consideration by the landowner for the last, I would say, 10 to 15 years. We've been having conversations with the county, so surprise to administration that this application is being brought forward, but we do anticipate that there'll be a number of comments coming in from adjacent landowners.
Thanks, Hillary. Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, yeah, if you, on the map, it doesn't quite cover all of it, but on the north side of the canal going up towards Highway 4, there's quite a few acreages on the other side of the canal too, and been developed over time. So with that in mind, I know that there are probably a lot of questions coming forward, especially about water, but I would move first reading of the bylaw 23-002 for Country Crossroads Estates.
Thank you, Lauren. Lauren has moved the recommendation that bylaw 23-002 Country Crossroad Estate Area Structure Plan be read a first time. Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to move that bylaw 23-003, land use bylaw amendment from rural agricultural to group country residential be read a first time.
Thank you, John. John has moved the recommendation that bylaw 23-003, land use bylaw amendment, rural agriculture to group country residential be read a first time. Any discussion? If not, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you, Hillary.
Thank you.
Move down in our agenda. Item E2, Corporate Services. E2.1, the 2023 Bursary and Bursary Ad-Hoc Selection Committee. We have our Director of Finance, Jennifer Place. Morning, Jen.
Good morning, thank you. I'm just going to bring it up here because my computer isn't working this morning, so if you'll just give me a second, Mr. Chairman. I'm not sure why it won't load anything, but good morning. This is just with regards to the upcoming 2023 Bursary and Bursary Ad Hoc Selection Committee. Through the 2022 Bursary Review and 2023 Budget Deliberations, there was some discussion amongst Council regarding the number of qualified applicants that were received with last year's selection, and that the County Council may want to consider either increasing the bursary amount of $1,000 for each for 2 recipients, or increasing the number of recipients that are eligible to receive the bursary. So within the existing policy 182, it does state that the bursary amount and number of bursaries available will be determined annually by Council through the annual budget process. Within the 2023 budget, there has only been 2 recipients at $1,000 each currently allocated. The closing date for the applications for the 2023 year are June 1st, with the bursaries being awarded by August 31st, or the last meeting of Council within August, which the recipients will be presented their award of $1,000 after reviewing the applications and having the selection done. Rather than go through the recommendations at this time, I'll just move to a bit of background there. So this will be the 4th consecutive year that Lethbridge County bursary has been issued per the Policy 182 guidelines. The policy does state that a selection committee of Council will have the full authority in selection of the recipients, and a specific number of ad hoc committee members is not stated within the policy. However, it has historically been 3 members. Last year, I believe it was Counselor Sayers, Counselor Kurbis, and Counselor Hickey, who were on the ad hoc committee. So of course, that can be changed as well if council wants to have more or less, but the committee does review, score, and bring back their recommendations to council for approval and award. If council were to decide that they want to increase either the amount of the annual bursary from 1,000 to recipients to more than 1,000, or increase the number of recipients for any reason, or for any amount, those additional monies could come from the council discretionary reserve, which is sitting at just over 150,000 right now. I've provided a few recommendations, so there's actually two sets of, recommendations here. One is with regards to the bursary itself, and the second is just with regards to selecting a committee to review. I know that we would like to get advertising for the bursary applications as soon as possible and get the information out to the schools within the area.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions from council? Any discussion? John, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To administration, just in terms of the council discretionary fund, has that been growing, dwindling? Where are we at in terms of its balance over the last few years?
Historically, if council has a surplus or the county is facing a surplus, funds have gone back into that bursary, or pardon me, that discretionary reserve. But I believe the reserve policy does have it cap out at 150,000 is the maximum.
And thank you for that. Just in light of that, and just my comments on it from last year being on the selection committee, I found that process very rewarding, and I think this is something that is a absolutely wonderful program that we can positively affect the lives of our young ratepayers, or family members of ratepayers, and if there was a way possible that we could maybe increase the number of bursaries or the amounts without adversely affecting our account balance, I'd be very much in favor of that.
Klaus, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'd like to agree with that. I think the amount itself, $1,000, I think it's a lot of work for the students to bring that forward and do a lot of work to get this all done. So I would be comfortable with upping that to $2,000 per person.
Thank you, Klaus. Eric, and then Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It might be a lot of work, but $1,000 goes quite a long ways. I'd be more inclined to support more students versus more money per student, because if we want to up the number of applicants plus up the price or the value, we get out of control pretty quick. So something I would like to see would be 5 applicant or 5 recipients and keep it at $1,000.
Lauren, go ahead.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. So I would have to agree with Claus. I think, given the inflation these days and the cost of going to post-secondary education, I think that $1,000 is maybe a little on the low side. I would prefer to see it move up to $1,500 and maybe go to 3 people. I do see what you're saying, Eric, but at times, we've only had 2 applications. So you never know from year to year what you're gonna get. So anyway, that's what I think. Thank you.
Jen, maybe could you speak to that? In the last several years, have there been multiple candidates that would qualify to receive the bursary, or has it been, like Lauren suggested, has it been a small number?
I would say the first 2 years, the applications were low, but it has definitely increased. Last year, we had a significant number. I want to say there was 12 or more last year, and I know there was a lot of debate over the selection of the 2. I think it was down to 3 or 4 where, council really had to, or the committee really had to make some tough decisions on which 2 they were going to go with. So my hope is that you know, the applications continue to come in as we continue and the word is out. I think once the schools are aware that this is an option, you know, they're going to be announcing it to their students.
Thanks, Jen. Go ahead, John.
Thank you. I would very much support 1,500 for 3, and, you know, just on a side note on that, if we only get a small number of applicants, and we can certainly, we're not obligated to actually push out those bursaries if we don't have any suitable applicants. This would be just a matter of, you know, if we have a number of applicants and we have suitable people that we can award the bursary to, then that would allow us to do that and give us the flexibility.
Thank you. Morris, you have any thoughts?
Well, yeah, my thoughts were to increase it from the few we did select every year, increase it to, I was hoping to 6 and keep it $1,000, you know, because I think, you know, $1,000 is still not that small of an amount, and I'm sure if you have 6 of them down there, last year we had how many of them? Was it?
I can't remember exactly the number, but there's at least 12.
Yeah, so, you know, if you did 6 and if he chose the 6 down there and they can get $1,000, I think that's very rewarding already to them. That's my thoughts.
Thank you. So it sounds like we have some, I think we're all in support of making a change. Do have some diverse opinions. I maybe just for myself, I do support raising it up. I do think that, you know, where, you know, tuition is gone and with inflation, I think there is merit to bring that up. But I also would support, you know, adding additional. I probably would fall in maybe with that 1,503 would kind of be something I would support, but open to if someone wants to make a motion or if carry the conversation. Klaus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, yeah, I guess we're a little bit all over the place, so I'll just make a motion and see where it goes. I would like to move that we up the member of the applicants to 3 and with $1,500 apiece.
Okay. And do we want to deal with the second part of it as well, the second part of the recommendation too? The 3 members of council be established.
Do that separate.
Do it separate? Okay. So Claus has moved the recommendation that county council increase number of bursary award recipients to 3, receiving $1,500 each, with the additional funding to come from the council discretionary reserve. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And the second element? John?
I'd like to move that we set up a ad-hoc bursary selection committee of 3 council members to be established, the review of the 2023 bursary applications, and the committee members to be determined by a discussion to be held.
Should we?
Like now.
No. Councillor Sayers did convey to me that he would have interest in sitting again. John?
I would have interest. Sorry, I would have interest in sitting again. I did find that, like I said, a very rewarding committee to be on. That said, I also recognize that there may be other members that may want to sit on this, and so you know, if we don't have anybody else, then I would happily sit. But if there's somebody else, I could and would stand down as well.
Lauren?
Basically going to say the same thing. If there's somebody else who wishes to take my place, I would step aside, but I would be glad to sit again if wanted.
Okay, so if council's comfortable, we'll stay with Mark, John, and Lauren then? Okay, you prepared to include that in your motion, John? Comfortable with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so John has moved that the ad hoc bursaries selection committee of 3 members of council be established to review the 2023 bursary applications, and the committee members are Mark Sayers, John Kurbis, and Lauren Hickey. Any further discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you, John. Moving down, E2.2, the 2022 year-end surplus deficit report. Jen?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as part of the year-end process and in preparation of the annual audit, All of the year-end entries and budgeted entries as required to ensure funding for capital and operating projects have been completed, as have been identified either, again, through the budget or by council resolution. Upon completion of these entries, the 2022 budget has resulted in an overall unaudited operating deficit of $395,000. I've included a summary of the surpluses and deficits by department, which I will review here shortly. I will add that in my 9+ years, this is the first deficit that I have presented to council. So take that good or bad, but it was a unique year, I think, as we're all very aware. So the budget is approved annually and is a guideline used for providing services, procurement of materials and supplies, and issuance of taxation and invoices for revenue purposes. When the budget is prepared, it contains estimates based on known revenues and expenses, as well as historical data. While these budgets are prepared and due diligence and much consideration within all departments to take care in adhering to the budget is considered, there are often unseen circumstances that generate variances, creating either a surplus or deficit within a department. As in previous years, administration has put together a summary outlining these variances and a transfer recommendation. 2022 was a unique year as inflation grew to a 40-year historical high, fuel costs rose significantly, and interest rates were down for a good portion of the year, all of which contributed to the deficit as the county worked to maintain all levels of service, requirements, and needs throughout the year. The audited financial statements are currently being reviewed. We have our auditors here this week. The audit committee will meet with the auditor prior to the financial statements being presented to council by KPMG in April. The recommendation for this deficit is to transfer from the reserve to cover it, which would put the end of year balance for operations at a zero. So I'll just go through the deficit report, which is included following the agenda item report. So the 2020 year financial year-end processes came to a close. Lethbridge County is looking at a deficit again of $395,000. While there are some significant department deficits due to operational changes, inflation, fuel, and supply cost increases, there are some annual budgets and year-end transaction entries that contributed to the bottom line. Although it is a significant number, it is approximately 2.5% over the approved budget for 2022, which is well below the 2022 inflation rate. Fleet services, utilities, and the IT department all had surpluses totaling $396,554, which was transferred to their reserves as per the budget. Again, that's how the budget is prepared. We transfer it to their reserves for future replacement of items. In fleet, it's vehicles and equipment. Utilities, it's future water, wastewater, etc. And then IT, it's for all of our equipment. So those items were budgeted. However, they would have offset the overall deficit if they had been left. But following the approved budget, they were transferred. I'll just start with each department, and we can go through, and if council has any questions, please interrupt me. So council had a deficit of just over $8,400. This is primarily due to additional contracted costs that were incurred to finalize the strategic and corporate plan, and some of the costs were due to registration and membership fees. We have seen an increase. It's not just supplies and fuel, it's everything has gone up because it obviously filters down. So there were some increases there. On the executive office, there was also a deficit of $62,836. This was due to some contracted changes in professional development fees that took place in 2022. Ag services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Who is all encompassed in executive office?
The CAO, the executive administrator, and both of the HR staff. Yep. Agricultural services had a small Yes, I'm sorry.
Thanks very much, Tori, or Mr. Chair, sorry. And the executive office, how much of that was due to professional development fees? What does that cover off?
I could definitely look that up and let council know. I kind of lumped it together. I think the largest portion, quite honestly, was just the contract change that took place with the review. There was an adjustment there. that contributed to that. Some of that was PD as well, though, definitely. I want to say it was around 10,000, but please don't quote me
Oh,
without
that's-
looking.
That's fine,
Yeah.
that's good enough, thank you.
Egg services, again, surplus of just over 4,000. You know, they're fairly on budget at $4,000. I would say that egg services came well within their budget. There were some savings realized in their area of materials and supplies, which is kind of ironic, but it's just what the need is at the time. The services to other departments, however, such as fleet, was over budget slightly, so they offset each other, and this was due to the increased cost, which we've already gone through with regards to operating maintenance and capital replacement of ag equipment. Fleet is showing a zero deficit or surplus because of the transfer, but their actual surplus realized was $227,200. This was transferred to the Fleet Equipment Capital Reserve. As with ASB, the rate charged on vehicles, machinery, and equipment is used to offset their fuel, parts, supplies, labor, and future capital replacement. The fuel budget itself was $284,297 over. Tires were $19,000 over, and parts and machine parts were $146,800 over, which was offset by the rates. Most of this fell into the Public Works Department, which you can see they have the largest deficit throughout. We were aware that Public Works was facing a deficit. At the last quarterly report, we did project that it would be a bit lower at $200,000. That was maybe a bit conservative. However, prior to the completion of the year-end transfers, the Public Works deficit was larger than anticipated. The road activities, maintenance, specifically grading, base stabilization, dust control, snow plowing, and sanding were the areas where we saw the largest budget over. And again, it goes back to fleet rates. Every piece of equipment that rolls is charged a rate per hour, and that's to cover all of the maintenance costs, fuel, and then their replacement. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So each unit is already billed back, but then that's billed back to Public Works, is that correct?
So fleet bills would bill each department, we'll use Public Works, and then fleet receives the revenue for that. So Public Works is paying, it's an internal transfer basically. So for the maintenance and operations and purchase of those vehicles, it all runs through fleet. So each department has to pay those costs, I guess you could say.
Okay, some of these costs that are in there, they're very standardized. Our gravel shouldn't have had any inflation with it. Dust control, some of those things. Maybe at some point we can look at the specifics of why, what's really costing us our money. And maybe Jeremy can just touch on that, like what just went way over?
So primarily this year, the biggest cost inflation has been fuel. I mean, near 285,000. For the cost of diesel fuel, we have seen just it gone up extraordinarily. I mean, we originally set a budget of 900,000, and we ended up just under 1.2 million for a total cost of fuel. So that fuel cost has been quite high, and then we've seen that trickle down into a bunch of other things. Machine parts are up. Filters, all general supply costs were up by, in some cases, 10 to 20%. So we saw all those rising inflationary costs. Same thing, cost of tires. I mean, a $2,000 grader tire suddenly was $2,500. Well, you got to replace 6 of those at a time. Then it starts to stack up and up. Scraper tire. The scraper tires we have are the most expensive ones around, and they are $10,000 a piece now. And a couple of years ago, they were about 6. So.
Thank you. John and Warren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, Jeremy, you answered what my question was going to be, because I was just reading through this and extrapolating that the largest part of that deficit was probably fuel and maintenance, but you confirmed that, so thank you.
I'll just add one more thing. Sometimes the wording on these can be like when we talk about graveling, it's not the cost of the gravel specifically. Sometimes it's the cost of what it costs us to process that gravel as well. So like in the case of the graveling, it's not the cost of gravel because we own our own gravel hit, so we have essentially a assumed cost of a royalty that we have on ourselves, but then the cost of crushing has gone up 20% this year, was what our latest quote was. So then that pushes that up. Plus then the graveling budget is also loaders, gravel trucks, trailers, all those pieces of equipment that essentially have gone up in cost to operate.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just, if I get this kind of straight in my mind here, the fuel cost in fleet were $284,000 above budget to match the number. They were a deficit in PW.
The majority of it did go to Public Works, yes.
So then how do you get the $227 surplus, I guess, in fleet?
Because they get all of the costs, or all of the revenue, I'll call it revenue, it's not really. The cost, the expenses to operate are turned back over to fleet. So they're supposed to run kind of at a zero. So every expense that they incur related to an activity, be it graveling, dust control, base stabilization, they should be getting back the revenue for that. But there's also a rate in there to cover any future capital recovery. So the more hours or the more it rolls, there's also that capital recovery cost on top of operations. So that kind of contributes a little bit to their surplus.
So just to follow up then, so if you rent a piece of equipment for, say, $100 an hour, you're saying you may actually charge $105 for it to get the capital recovery?
So of that, I would say of that $100, our rate would be split maybe 60-40. Like $60 would go towards the operations, 40 would go towards capital replacement. So they set the rate so it's one hourly rate that includes both.
Good, Jeremy.
Just to further elaborate, because I deal with this all the time. So what we do as far as the equipment, and basically the fleet department acts as just a transaction department, essentially. So we have a cost of capital for equipment, which gets charged into each of the departments per year. So the cost of, let's just say a grader, per se. A grader, the capital cost per year is $60,000. Well, we break that cost of that grader up into percentage groups. I say 70% goes to summer operations, which is regular maintenance, and then we say 30% goes to winter operations maintenance. So that capital cost, if it's say $50,000, $35,000 goes as a capital cost to the public works grading operations, $15,000 goes to the winter operations. That's the capital side. Then we move into the operational side, which includes what it costs for us to run mechanics, facilities, parts, filters, oils, fuel, and so on. And then we charge a cost per hour, which is basically charged out to each of the departments essentially as that activity occurs. And when that activity occurs is essentially when we've got employees that input into our system, basically that they've used a piece of equipment for 6 hours. So they use a grader for 6 hours, then it bills out as an operating cost. I'm just going to say round numbers again, don't quote me on what it is, of $50 per hour. So then that machine has basically been billed out for $300 an hour for use on the operational side. The capital side is an additional cost, but it stays separate from that.
There is the capital is based on our inventory as well. So if there's any equipment that doesn't get sold in the year or is sold late in the year, they're still, I guess, generating some revenue from some capital replacement revenue on that until it's sold and we have to repurchase to replace.
Sorry. So basically then the surplus would have sort of been created by extra use of machinery. Is that correct? Because if you use the machinery, you're also paying to the capital, right?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is that a long-winded answer? I guess? Was there any more questions on Public Works?
Go ahead, Jen.
Okay, I'll move down to utilities. So utilities, similarly to fleet, is showing a zero surplus or deficit. The utility department operates as its own under operating recovery, with the exception of the $327,925, which is collected through taxation to fund the debenture. and that aligns with the budget. The department did have a overall surplus of $167,700, which was transferred to the utility capital reserve. This was strictly due to water sales increases and some savings in wages and benefits that were unutilized until the new utility manager position was filled. So there's a bit of a gap there. In infrastructure services, this department has a small surplus of $13,500, and this was primarily due to contract and general service funds that were not fully utilized. Assessment and taxation was pretty much on budget, only had a surplus of $1,440. And it's just basically some rounding assessment fees and supplies that were saved there. So the finance and administration and general revenues department, and I put the general revenues in there because the taxes, penalties, interest, those kinds of things flow through what we call general revenues, which is part of finance and admin. So it's showing a deficit of $20,036. So while it is showing a deficit, a good portion of that is because of the 2022 year-end transfer for uncollectible taxes, which has risen significantly over the past several years and is primarily due to oil and gas, outstanding oil and gas. We haven't submitted a PERC application for the 2022 year, or for this year. It would have had to have been done in February because we're still waiting on some bankruptcies. It seems like some of these companies have just sort of dissolved or disappeared, but we don't have anything to support that they're not active in order to make those applications. We do have a couple large companies that we know are operating that have not fully paid or have some arrears, and they are significant. On the ones that we do have bankruptcies for or no, we've quit adding penalty because it's just incurring our uncollectible amount, and it's increasing it at this time. And we do anticipate we're going to receive something. So that was a $346,569 year-end transfer. There was a time when that number was like $15,000. You know, that's pretty easy to cover within a budget. But as mentioned, it has gone up. So that has contributed significantly to the overall deficit. Interest rates were down, but we did all right.
One sec, please.
Yep, sorry.
Go ahead, Klaus.
Just thank you, Mr. Chairman. The ones that are not paying their taxes to the county right now, is it really hard to pinpoint, like, if they're still in business or not? Because you just mentioned that a lot of them, you don't know if they got bankrupt. So how long does it take before you get notified that they're bankrupt and that you will probably not be collecting? And the other question is that how often do they get notified that they're in arrears?
So we do check the sites. Les does check the sites to see if there's any operations going on. There are a couple that we know are active, and some of those are just a year in arrears, so we anticipate they will get paid. We have had a couple that were bought. I'll say bought loosely, and they paid. We kind of went back and forth on them on paying some of the arrears. You know, like if you purchased a property and there was an outstanding balance, somebody would cover that. So we've been working with the companies on trying to get some arrears covered. Likely we will be bringing forward in the next year some taxes that we'll have to write off just because there's no, Les follows, he has his contacts. We look up on the bankruptcy, I guess, website, I don't know what you want to call it. There's ways to look, and then we get notified of every bankruptcy that takes place. As far as them being notified, they get their notices, and they get late notices as well. So there's a couple times a year at least that they're getting notification. But sometimes they come back, sometimes they just go out and we never see the tax notice again. So everything short of Googling where they're at. But a lot of these companies, they just don't seem to be active anymore. Whether they've taken on another name is hard to say.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you. So with these oil and gas taxes that are unpaid in these companies, I'm assuming then it's a little different than with actually having a physical ownership of a piece of property, because if there's a physical ownership of a piece of property and there's tax arrears on it, when that land gets transferred, those taxes have to be paid, correct?
That's correct. There's that option, and there's also tax sale. We can hold a tax sale.
Right.
Where in this case, it's often lease equipment. Like it's, so basically they're being taxed on equipment more than, or M&E, rather than a physical property that we can sell. at
So when a
tax
lease
sale.
gets sold from one oil company to another oil company, we really don't have a good avenue of attaching unpaid taxes and having that paid up when that transfer is done.
No, and this is an issue across the province.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
a hot button
Yeah,
with.
and I mean, I think ours probably is fairly low compared to a lot of other municipalities as well. I mean, doesn't make it better, but it's, you know, it's unfortunate that there isn't more recourse.
Thanks, Jen. Lauren?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So are they charged the same penalties as anybody who misses their taxes on time, or?
Yes.
And the follow-up, just to what John was saying, the majority of them actually don't own the property where the equipment sits either, so that makes it very difficult to kind of track down and collect.
Yeah, yeah, it makes it very difficult. And, I mean, I guess we could confiscate it but what good is a well to us? An inactive well in most cases. So that, just as we discussed, did contribute a lot to this deficit. The investment interest actually did come in better than anticipated, which was good to see, at just over 800,000. And we transferred 700 of that to the capital reserves and distributed it per the average interest rate that we earned throughout the year. IT, again, this is another zero surplus deficit account. It's kind of self-funded, but they had a very small surplus. It was just over 1,600. So IT was pretty well right on budget for the year, and that went to their IT capital replacement reserve. Community Services Administration had a $22,600 surplus, and this is due to a combination of things. A big piece of it, though, was the library board didn't increase their requisition for the year, and we had anticipated an increase based on, I think, previous year's correspondence. So that actually contributed to that as well. Planning and Development had a surplus of over 80,000, and this can be attributed to additional revenues earned throughout the year for development and building permits and planning fees. So the revenue earned for those specifically was just over 64,000, and the rest was just some savings in reduced professional development and membership fees. Now, Emergency Services had a small deficit of 16,000. So well fire revenues collected were well over budget of 462,000. We had a $600,000 budget anticipated based on the new agreement. The expenses were the same, and they were 136,000. Sorry. The emergency expenses and fire inspections were up over budget as well. Some of this lost revenue, though, was due to invoicing adjustments on large projects, or not even projects, pardon me, large events that took place. I know council had several come forward that were fairly significant. Some adjustments were made there, and this contributed to that deficit as well. Additional department setup costs were incurred for taking on a full-time fire services manager, and then the fleet, a new truck as well, which was budgeted, or wasn't budgeted for, but it was brought forward as a separate resolution for council. So there's items associated with that as well. The Community Peace Officer Department had an increase in their fines revenue of just over 43,000, and their expenses were in line with the budget. So overall, the deficit is not too bad for that department, considering kind of the uniqueness of the year with the fire events that took place. And that's basically the summary.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you. So when looking through all of the explanations and the different categories here with the surplus of fleet of being transferred to reserves, does that, are we at a $395,000 deficit net of those transfers, or are those transfers, like the $227,000 in fleet that was transferred to reserves, is that factored in? If that wasn't done, then we'd be $227,000 higher deficit, or is? Or
The deficit will be lower.
would be lower?
Yeah.
So essentially, when we look at the $227,000 that was transferred in fleet and the $167 in utilities that was transferred, that basically comes up with our $395,000.
Yes, that's correct. When I do these transfers, I'm following the budget and the resolutions because that's what the auditors are looking at. That doesn't mean that council can't say to me now that they want to pull from fleet to cover the deficit, or whatever option council likes. I put forward the recommendation to pull it from the tax equalization reserve. Historically, when there's been a surplus, it's been distributed to the department reserves, generally where the surplus happened, and some to the tax equalization reserve as well. But definitely, council has the discretion to move those funds however they see fit.
Go ahead, John.
And sorry, just kind of where I was going with that is that 395,000 looks like a large number, but when we factor in all of the transfers that were done to reserves, it's far less serious. Because there's been slightly over 400,000 that was transferred into various reserves.
Correct.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say once those surplus transfers were made, that actually our bottom line when we're looking at what is required for tax support was fairly close.
Thank you, Jen. How would you like to proceed, council? John?
I'd like to move that the reallocation of funds from the restricted surplus reserves to unrestricted surplus be transferred in the tax equalization reserve in the amount of $395,000 to offset the 2022 deficit.
Thank you, John. John has moved the recommendation that the reallocation of funds from restricted surplus reserves to unrestricted surplus be transferred from the tax equalization reserve in the amount of $395,000 to offset the 2022 deficit. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much, Jen.
Thank you.
With that, we have about just over 8 minutes till 10 o'clock, so why don't we take a short recess and we will reconvene with our public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We'll call the meeting back to order at 10:02 this morning. We will move in our agenda to item D, public hearings. We have a 10 o'clock a.m. public hearing for bylaw 22-021, road closure, sale, and consolidation, public hearing. So with that, I will recess the public meeting and ask for a motion to open the public hearing. Morris has moved to open the public hearing for bylaw 22-021, road closure, sale, and consolidation. The public hearing is being held pursuant to the Municipal Government Act as amended. The public hearing is being live streamed via the county's YouTube page. And with that, the public hearing for bylaw 22-021 is now officially open. I didn't ask to call the question, did I? I didn't ask the question. Why don't we go back to there and we'll do that right then. Morris has moved to open the public hearing for bylaw 22-021, road closure, sale, and consolidation. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Sorry. Thank you. With that, I will now ask the Supervisor of Planning and Development to review the nature of the hearing and provide an overview of what is being proposed. Hillary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Council. Today for the public hearing, we are discussing the bylaw 22-021, which is to close a portion of a service road for that is used by a sole entity, being Green Prairie International. The application was received to close this particular road and sell it and consolidate it with the adjacent lands. The road in question is considered somewhat undeveloped. Their portion of it has been developed, and I'll get into that in a little bit, but the western portion is undeveloped. The county administration has determined that this road is not required as part of the county's road network, and as the parcels to the north and east are now under the same ownership, the applicant intends to consolidate all of their parcels together and the road title into one title. We discussed this application with Alberta Transportation in depth, as they were the original reason why this particular service road was created back in 1995. They had no concerns or objections with regards to this particular road closure and consolidation. They did have some requirements on their the stipulations to the road closure, one being that the access that was to the acreage parcel to the east, this access across the railway would be closed and decommissioned, as it would not be no longer required because there will no longer be a separate title in this area. So that was their only condition of this particular application. The application was sent to the Sunny South News for the advertising in the February 7th and 14th editions. I did receive one call from an adjacent landowner just clarifying where the road closure was and that their property was not going to be impacted. As indicated on the phone, there is no impact to an adjacent landowner. The road closure is just directly for Green Prairie's purpose at this point in time. It's included in your agenda package. The road closure does not include the entrance or the canal area for this particular area. SMRID was clear that they wanted the canal to be part of the public road network, just in terms of ongoing, oversight with regards to the particular bridge. But from the beginning of Green Prairie's title all the way to the very eastern extent, that is the portion of road that is proposed to be closed. No other comments were received with regards to the application, or objections were received. Upon giving first reading of the bylaw, I did send out notices to all the utility companies, affected utility companies in the area. There was no objections to the road closure. Fortis and TELUS both required easements, which they have already provided, would be sent up with the agenda package to the entire road closure package to Alberta Transportation for their final sign-off. One thing I will note with regards to this application is that the applicant is requesting that the land costs be waived, as the road in question was originally required, as I mentioned, by Alberta Transportation when Highway 3 was upgraded, and this was done back in 1995. The original landowner did not receive financial compensation for the dedicated lands, which were purchased by Alberta Transportation for a value of $1, on the condition that a canal crossing be installed by Alberta Transportation. So there was some in-kind work done. And that canal crossing is the portion that will stay within the county's road network system. An additional information with regards to the request, I did confirm with Green Prairie that the service road was paved by Green Prairie in 2013 at their sole cost, and that the road is currently being maintained by Green Prairie. So it's not a road that has been upgraded or maintained by the county since 1995, since it was created in 1995. So with that, that concludes my very brief presentation for council. There is a representative here from Green Prairie if there are any questions of them. I will just state my recommendation for this particular application is that bylaw 22-021 be sent to the Minister of Transportation for approval, as they have to approve it prior to second and third reading, as is the case with all road closures within Lethbridge County. And also I have a second recommendation that County Council waive the land cost fees for the reasons I expressed with regards to the situation, specifically with this road closure. And with that, I will turn it back to you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Hillary. This is council's opportunity to receive input from the public. Those making presentations are asked to state their name and review their points. We ask that you refrain from asking questions to council. The intention of the public hearing is not to debate or defend the contents of the bylaw or the position which individual councillors may have on the bylaw. Questions asked of a councillor by a presenter may be ruled out of order. Presentations to council will start with the applicant who has made a submission, followed by any other persons wishing to comment on the proposal. Please keep your comments to the point. After each speaker, members of council will be permitted to ask questions of the presenter to clarify any details. No debating or questions from the floor will be allowed. With that, I would open the floor. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw? Is there anyone wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw? I'll ask a third time. Is there anyone wishing to speak to the proposed bylaw? If there's nothing further, I would ask for a motion to close the public hearing. John?
Thank you. I'd like to move that we close the public hearing.
John has moved to close the public hearing for bylaw 22-021, road closure, sale, and consolidation. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We will resume our public meeting at 10:09 this morning. Are there any questions from council at this time? Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for our, the land cost fees. In a regular situation, what cost do we normally stand to collect back?
In a typical road closure situation, it's the cost of the land of the adjacent land value that's applied to the road in question. So just not like the buildings or anything, just the straight land value.
Any other questions? John?
Sorry, just to follow up on that, would we be able to roughly quantify what that would be?
In this case, I did not ask Les for what the assessed value was. So I'd have to get that from the assessor to determine what the land value would be for this particular area. I wouldn't want to guess.
Klaus?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move the first recommendation. I think we probably have to do it in two times, right? I would.
Yes,
think
so
that-
I would recommend you can do it in two parts. So you could approve that administration proceed with sending the application to Alberta Transportation first.
So I'll move that bylaw 22-021 be sent to the Minister of Transportation for approval.
Thank you, Klaus. Klaus has moved that bylaw 22-021 be sent to the Minister of Transportation for approval. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that the County Council waive the land cost fees.
Hillary, would you like should we mention the bylaw in that, or is that okay just as that is, or how would you like that?
I think, how did I write? I probably just wrote that it was to waive the fees. You could probably mention the bylaw just to make sure that it's clear, I guess.
Associated with bylaw
Yes.
22-021?
Yes.
Does that work, Eric? Yes. Eric has moved the recommendation that County Council waive the land cost fees associated with bylaw 22-021. Any further discussion? Go ahead, Lauren.
Make
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I guess I'm really not in favor of that because it sets a precedent. There are lots of other parcels with the same exact scenario, and does that mean we're going to waive everyone in the future? I think it's very precedent setting, and I wouldn't be in favor of that.
Thank you, Lauren. John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would concur. I struggle with this because I appreciate that we've been advised that there was no transfer cost, no monetary cost, but there was a trade-off of some, a bridge over the canal being built as a result. And I mean, for the most part, what I'm seeing on that, that's more just anecdotal. That's just what we've been advised as opposed to what we know to be firm. So I struggle with this, and I appreciate that this may not be a large dollar value, but I think that it would establish a dangerous precedent for us as council to contemplate this.
Thank you, John. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The land was taken from this parcel, and now it's going back to the parcel, and we're going to collect on it in between. How is that justifiable? The bridge is there anyway. It's staying there. It's going to be public property. What if this went into a rural acreage subdivision? What if it went into anything else? We're contemplating it because it's one big site, and it ended up as a monopoly of that site. But that's in other cases, it could have been multiple people benefiting, and then we wouldn't have sold the property off back. But either way, I think it can go back to the landowner.
Thank you, Eric. Klaus, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with that because I think that we got to look at every situation different. It's not, and I think this one is not comparing apples to apples with a lot of the other applications that we had of trying to waive the land fees, because I think every situation different, especially now this one here, like what Eric said, it was piece of the land, and now it's just going back, and we haven't done anything to it like since 1995, what Hillary was saying. So I think we have no cost there, and I think that it's only fair to just give it back.
Thank you, Klaus. Go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So two questions come to my mind. So Hillary, was it Alberta Transportation who asked for this right away, or was it the county?
Through to Councillor Hickey from the chair, it was Alberta Transportation in this matter. Yeah.
So in the case of most of these almost identical situations, is it Alberta Transportation that requires the right-of-way, or is it the county? Like, I know in some rural, remote cases, it is the county only, but, so how do we justify that? It's part of their right to get the subdivision to start with, to give up the land for a road, so, kind of murky, I think.
I can maybe explain a little bit further, Mr. Chairman, with regards to that question, which is a great question. With regards to this particular situation, there was no subdivision for that was needed for the road. Alberta Transportation requested the road of the landowner at that time because of the improvements to the highway. They didn't want to have individual accesses coming off of the highway anymore. They wanted them routed through the range road system or township road system. So the landowner at the time, which wasn't Green Prairie, this was just a parcel, and they gave the land to Alberta Transportation, knowing that that their previous access would be removed anyhow, and the stipulation was that they got the canal crossing so that they could access their title. In most situations where we're granting, in this case, I would say it's pretty unique, or maybe it was very common in the 1990s that the Alberta Transportation required service roads as a way of planning, to get the traffic off of, to stop having those individual accesses. When the county requests a road, it's usually in a subdivision format, like, Group Country Residential, say the last one that I brought forward, they'll have a road within their subdivision. And so we're taking that road. It's obviously for their benefit to have the road. And so we're taking it, they have to build it, but we take it over and maintain it. So I'd say there's some nuances with this one that I feel are a little bit different than some other scenarios. We weren't involved in this process. We didn't have a say in this process. So we're just, I think what I would concur is that, yeah, the landowner at the time agreed to give up, 6 acres, I think 6 acres of land for the road. Probably at that time, maybe they thought, well, maybe there would be subdivision, but there was none. It was just turned over to Green Prairie, or they bought it and then created their facility there. So that's just kind of maybe a little bit more context. I don't know if that helps you, Councillor Hickey, with regards to your deliberation. So.
Thank you, Hillary. Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the purpose of this road originally was then to give access to the pie-shaped piece that is to the east.
That's correct.
And that has now been transferred to the current owner, so their goal was to amalgamate all of those parcels.
That's correct.
I guess one question is that because we've sort of set this to move forward with Minister of Transportation for approval, what's the safety net if they don't amalgamate that?
It is a requirement of the road closure.
Oh,
They
so
have to consolidate.
They have to do that
Yes.
if the road gets closed, okay.
Yes, that's a condition of a road closure, is that you have to consolidate with the adjacent title. You can't have standalone titles.
Right, so that process is now going and it can't be stopped then?
That's correct,
Okay,
yes.
fair enough. All right, and I guess the other comment that I have with that, and you touched on it, is that this was the previous owner that allocated this land so that there could be access to this other parcel. So we're not talking about the current owner
No.
of it. So when we're talking about waiving any land fee costs, because it was essentially given for the canal access right away, that was all done by the previous owner, not this owner. Okay, so financially, this current owner is not out anything as a result of giving that land, because they purchased it after that, all that work was done.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? So Eric, correct? Eric has moved that County Council waive the land cost fees associated with bylaw 22-021. Is there any further discussion? I will just note that I will support the motion. I agree with what Councillors Van Essen and Van der Veen had to say. Anything else? If not, I will call the question. Those in favor? Those opposed? That's carried. Thanks, Hillary.
Thank you, Council.
We can move in our agendas to item E 2.3, Business Tax Bylaw number 23-010. Good morning, Jeremy. How are you today?
Good, thank you. So today I'm bringing forward bylaw number 23-010. That is the Business Tax Bylaw, the 2023 Business Tax Bylaw. So just a little bit of background. The Business Tax Bylaw was first passed in 2017 and has been passed concurrently since then. There is $1.5 million in projected revenue if this bylaw is passed. And the steps required for this through the MGA is to pass the budget before you pass the bylaw, and then finally passing the rate bylaw for the business tax. So this money will go towards maintenance and improvements of paved roads, bridges, and the market access network debt. And the revenue will be from specific agriculture businesses. The only changes from last year are the bylaw numbers and the dates for the bylaw. The recommendation from administration is that bylaw 23-010, the 2023 business tax bylaw, receive first, second, and third reading. There is, for alternatives, you could, or council could not pass the bylaw, and no tax will be applied to agriculture operations, but new funding sources or canceled projects will have to be dealt with, and market access network debt funding will also be needed. So as mentioned before, this is anticipated to raise $1.5 million, and that will go towards the market access network, and there's a total of $2.15 million that will be spent on the market access network.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any questions? Claus, go ahead.
Well, I think this is a formality that we have to do every year, so I'll just move that the bylaw number 23-010 being the 2023 Business Tax Bylaw receive first, second, and third reading.
Just move first. Just move first, yeah.
Did I say?
Just move first.
Okay. So I'll move the first reading, that bylaw number 23-010 be read for the first time.
Thank you, Claus. Claus has moved first reading of bylaw 23-010, the 2023 Business Tax Bylaw. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Second reading? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that bylaw number 23-010, being the 2023 Business Tax Bylaw, be read a second time.
Thank you, John. John has moved the second reading of bylaw 23-010, being the 2023 Business Tax Bylaw. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And consideration of third reading. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that we consider reading bylaw number 23-010 for a third time.
Thank you, Eric. Eric has moved that we consider the reading of bylaw 23-010, the 2023 Business Tax Bylaw, for a third reading. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And third reading. Lauren?
I would move third reading of bylaw 23-010.
Thank you, Lauren. Lauren has moved third reading of bylaw number 23-010, the 2023 Business Tax Bylaw. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Moving down, E2.4, the 2023 Business Tax Rate Bylaw, number 23-011. Jeremy.
So as mentioned, this is the 2023 Business Tax Bylaw 23-011. Same background as the previous bylaw. Now that the budget has been passed and the tax bylaw has been passed, the tax rate bylaw now needs to be passed. It is set at $2.5 per animal unit, and it's been the same since 2017, and it applies to specific agriculture operations. The only difference between this bylaw and previous bylaws is the bylaw number and dates. Recommendation by administration is that bylaw 23-011, the business tax bylaw or business tax rate bylaw, receive first, second, and third reading based on that it was passed in the budget and the business tax bylaw was passed as well. There are alternatives. The rate could be changed or reduced. So reducing the rate will lower the taxes, and new fundings or less projects will have to be considered, and it will also create a precedent for future years. And it could also not be approved, and then there will be no taxes to the agricultural operations, and then also new funding or less projects, and then also the market access network debt will also have to be considered, and then it will raise $1.5 million for the market access network.
Thank you, Jeremy. Council? Claus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move that bylaw 23-011 be read for the first time for the business tax rate bylaw.
Thank you, Claus. Claus has moved first reading of bylaw 23-011, the 2023 Business Tax Rate Bylaw. Go ahead, John. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The current rate being contemplated at $2.50 per animal unit Has there been any increase as a result of inflation since it was originally instigated?
No, it's been the same since 2017.
Would it be appropriate for us to look at the potential of that? Because we, unfortunately, as we've seen with our previous deliberations over our budget, cost of maintaining and operating the equipment has dramatically increased, and doesn't seem to be any indication that it's going to go down. And in the last 5 years since this has, having this rate stagnant really puts us in a situation where we're constantly then behind on this. And I'm not suggesting maybe, anything dramatic, but maybe 1 or 2 cents per animal unit might be appropriate for us to contemplate and consider.
Thank you, John. Jen, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just for clarity, these funds are specifically for the debt repayment and capital projects. Not to say that capital project costs haven't increased, but just for clarity, it isn't part of our operations, our general operations.
Right.
Yeah.
Lauren, did you?
Well, I concur with John, but I think a 2% increase is well within a limit, because look at all the other projects we have with them extra funds other than the debt reservicing. Like, everything is going up, and it's got to come from somewhere. So I think 2% is not out of line.
Thanks, Lauren. Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's doing its intent. It's repaying its loan. It's funding some capital projects as it can. Let's give it a year. We're working fairly hard on farmland assessment, and that's, I think, run that one through, see what happens, what we can do with that, and in the event of a failure there, I could look at something in the next year, but not at this time.
Thank you, Eric. Claus?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I agree with Eric. I think we're not gonna, we should not be doing this, absolutely not. I think we're gonna be opening a whole new can of worms if we're gonna be doing this, and it's, like I said, it's doing its purpose, it's paying off a loan that we have to do, so I don't see no reason for upping this.
Thank you, Claus. Any further discussion? Claus has moved the recommendation that bylaw 23-011, being the 2023 business tax rate bylaw, be read a first time. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Second reading. Eric?
I'd like to move that. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move that bylaw 23-011 be read a second time.
Thank you, Eric. Eric has moved that bylaw 23-011, being the 2023 business tax rate bylaw, be read a second time. Any discussion? I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. And consideration of third reading. Claus?
I'll move that bylaw 23-011 be read for the third time, consideration of the reading at the third time.
Thank you, Claus. Claus has moved the consideration of third reading for bylaw 23-011, the 2023 business tax rate bylaw. Any further discussion? Not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? And that is not unanimous, so we will be done for today, I believe. Thank you. Moving down in our agendas, E3 Municipal Services, E3.1 Road Ban Information.
Good morning, Council. So just bear with me for a moment here. I just want to pull up some information as part of this presentation. Primarily, this is information-based. There was an inquiry from Council at the March 2nd Council meeting in regards to what we were essentially doing for road bans. The Timeliness of it is perfect because essentially we're right at the cusp of essentially spring road ban season. I haven't checked the province as of today, but they should be. Saskatchewan announced that they were putting on road bans on Tuesday, so I expect the federal government, or sorry, not the federal government, the provincial government will announce that they'll be putting road bans on some of their 1, 2, and 3 numbered highways here coming up. So previously, and this is a little bit of history as well, Public Operations had previously updated the road ban bylaw 2020 -025 and policy 355 in December of 2020, so that predates some of the new councillors we have present, which involved a review of the past practices regarding road bans, permitting, and enforcement. So previously we had a agreement with a company called Road Data as well that did all of our permitting fees. Once I started with the county, then we moved to essentially eliminating that agreement and moving to doing our own automatic permitting because it's actually done through the Travis road system. So the bylaw provides the delegated authority to impose a road ban or set weight restrictions on a highway or bridge under the direction, control, and management of Lethbridge County through the chief administrative officer or their designate, and typically that designate has been myself. Sorry. Should have had this prep before. Annual road bans have been established by the Director of Public Operations and published through the county website. A road ban order is issued for any changes to current road ban conditions, and this is sent off to Alberta Transportation whenever we actually change what our road ban condition is. Signage changes are then conducted by staff, typically here in the spring, and those are temporary road signs that are put up to essentially advertise any existing road bans we have. One of the things that I did not contain within here, one of the a general direction and a general discussion we've had with the council previously is in regards to gravel road bans, because there's always an inquiry if we're going to put on gravel road bans. And the direction has been, because spring is actually the main time for producers in this area for agriculture, that we would maintain gravel roads at 100% all the time. Previously, we also used to issue landlocked permits or exemptions for agricultural operations that are located on hard surfaces. This was a bit of a redundancy. We were issuing up to a couple hundred permits. My question to my staff at the time 3 years ago was, have we ever not given somebody permission? And their answer was no, so I said, then why are we issuing permits? So we eliminated that process, so agriculture can get their work done. So, I'll open it up for some questions while I'm trying to pull this up.
Are there any questions for Jeremy at this time? Morris, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was thinking of that Highway 25 going towards Ancient from Turin to Ancient down there. Did you get any more up-to-date information from transportation, what the intent is for them to do with that road?
It's Morris. That is an item coming up in our correspondence. Yeah, F1.
Timing is perfect on that one. Though the date on that letter that they actually did send is a little bit dated, considering when we had that previous discussion with Alberta Transportation, but there are a number of provincial highways that that one in particular is not in good condition and has been banned at 50%, as well as a section of Highway 521 for as long as I've been down in this region. That goes off to the, go ahead.
Thank you. Why is the only animal or the only hauling product that gets a full exemption milk and cream?
The table in this is actually based on Alberta Transportation standards. Basically, what we tried to mirror with the road ban policy and with the bylaw was basically to follow exactly what Alberta Transportation had existing for exemptions, so that there was no conflict essentially between those two if people were transporting any kind of goods or materials, and they moved from a transportation roadway onto a county-operated roadway. As
Thanks
far
for
as
that, Jeremy.
why they get the extra exemption to 100%. Potable water actually is a weird one because it goes down to, I think it's 85 and then 80 during road ban seasons. So if you can look up here on the map, so basically we operate within the Travis system right now, and this is for commercial vehicle loads. So whenever we activate, and that's where the majority of our road bans actually come into effect, is dealing with commercial vehicles. So at any given time, we have road bans that exist right now on, or we have year-round exemptions on certain roadways. We have 50% year-round roadways banned on. Each of these is a unique segment. So in particular, we discussed this one in one of the previous meetings, was this is the Sundial Road, and you can highlight sections, and you can, it was a tedious process setting this up in the first place, but basically you get complete control over your transportation network this way, and you can set all those commercial road bans literally by the click of a button. You can see that on this one, it's got a 50% road ban. Effective date is 2021 when I inputted this, and our expiry date is never, because we're going to keep that roadway permanently banned. So moving down into what we'll be doing coming up here, and I'm looking at potential for, I have my operations staff watching for where we need to essentially make any seasonal road bans coming up. And I've set the tentative date, or I guess this isn't saved right now. I'll be probably setting the tentative date for probably the Monday following, looking at March 27th, depending on what happens with conditions here in the next little bit. Being somewhat preemptive, but then we also put out a notification to the public that we will be putting on road bans at the following a weekend or something like that. So we'll put road bans in place on a Monday. So in the case of this one, you can just go in here, you can set your parameters, you can edit this portion, and I can set it right now to if it lets me. So I can set this at any given time, and then we can activate these or inactivate these at any given time. Now, this is the commercial permit side. Go ahead, Eric.
Do we do this in collaboration with the province for like Highway 25, that it matches up with 519 road bans or any of those? Like, do the provincial highways connect with us when we're doing road bans?
Typically I watch for when the province puts their road bans on. Typically they've got a general parameter, and I look back at the historical here. March has always been historically when they put road bans in place. So when they activate those, we try to make sure our roadways are in conjunction with what those would mirror. I mean, they don't put a lot of bans or substantial bans on any of the roadways in this area. Highway 508 on the south end goes down to 75%, I believe, coming up here. And outside of that, Highway 519 doesn't receive a road ban. Highway 25, except for that section north of 521, remains at 100%. They've got, I mean, there is a pretty extensive list, and then they've got restricted bridges and stuff like that for weight tolerances and so on. So this is the ongoing process. We get about I think it's 12,000, just a little bit over 10,000 in revenue per year, essentially coming through this system, and it's all automated. So basically, it goes through the system. If there are any exemptions, potentially when we get wide loads or anything like that, there are essentially specific approvals we need to go in here and do, and those come to myself and other operations staff for approval. So there's some options for the county in the future as well on this. We do have a bylaw in place right now, and it is within our schedule of fees that we charge $20 per permit. That has been since 2018. This is something in the future we could look at changing in the schedule of fees. We do have a specific bylaw that says $20 that was passed in 2018, so we would have to change the bylaw as well accordingly. So if there's an appetite for the council to change that fee structure, we can look at that as well. And then I'm just looking for overall feedback as far as if there's any other information that's required from council on road bans.
Thank you, Jeremy. I would just relay, I know I've had feedback in the last several years regarding gravel road bans and just the appreciation that they are left at 100% during that spring season, just acknowledging the fact that, like you said, that is when operations for crop farming ramp up. So I think it was a good way for the county to realize how agriculture works in the county and to allow producers to do the work they need to do. Any other questions or comments for Jeremy? Go ahead, Klaus.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I think that adding on to what Reeve just said, it was we had some feedlot owners do some figuring the cost of what it would cost to go into a road ban, and it was substantial, especially when they're going down south with their animals and everything like that. I mean, it was you got to go with your 75 or your 90% all the way, and that was it was a substantial amount that they were going to be out of pocket for that.
Any other questions, discussion? If not, thank you very much, Jeremy. Appreciate that for information. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there anything coming up for future? Do we want to take a look at whether or not that fee needs to be increased, or any changes within the road ban policy itself or bylaw?
Council?
Or we're good with it?
John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say that, like anything else, we should do a pretty significant review on the fees to make sure it's in line with what other municipalities are charging and keeping pace with the inflationary pressures that we're having to deal with maintaining the roads.
Okay.
Thank you, John. Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't fully get the fee. Who's all paying? And yeah, I guess who's all paying for it, and what are they're getting access to the Travis system, I understand, but what, could you explain it a little more?
Yeah. So for any commercial vehicles, let's say an oil rig. We had an application from an oil rig. Service rig needed to come into site location. If they have to travel on any banned roadways or anything like that, then they have to apply. Anytime they make any kind of commercial vehicle move, they have to apply for an application from point A to point B. And this is also, I mean, they get a fee from us and they get a fee from the provincial government for, use on the highway as well. And it basically allows also enforcement, whether that be the Sheriff's Department, the RCMP, or any community peace officers. They can actually see where these movements actually are, and are these essentially approved by the local authority or by the province. So it's very specific to commercial vehicles, whether that be commercial, any kind of commercial carriers and so on, that potentially have a significant, lots of it's to do with mostly significant weights, sometimes width restrictions. House moving and stuff like that is very common in this area. We see lots of requests for when there's bridge restrictions and stuff like that, because vehicles can't necessarily pass in the laneway with a certain offset.
Go ahead, Morris.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I think some of our adjacent municipalities, they still do put road bans on the gravel roads.
Some do, yes. It's
It's
at
a-
every municipality's discretion.
Yeah.
Depends on the intensity. I think for the intensity of traffic that we have, especially when we're talking about the confined feeding operations, as Councillor Vanderveen alluded to, I mean, there is a substantial cost if you have to scale your stuff down to 75% or 90% to travel on roadways and then be transporting that significant distances.
Anything else? Thanks, Jeremy. Move down to item E 3.2, Public Works 2023 level of service.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So today we have the Public Works level of service forward for potential adoption by council. The process that we currently have is we would essentially go through the budget process in the fall of 2022, and then once the level of service is essentially set, concurrently preferably, actually, I'd probably like to get it a little bit closer to following the budget to be approved, as the level of service document connects directly to that. Unfortunately, with some of the recent changes, it's been a little bit difficult to get all of that aligned. So the level of service policy is intended to provide the baseline of the core services for the Public Works Department. It's not an exhaustive list of all of our activities, but it does provide that baseline. Within the policy, the public can then have a tangible view of the maintenance operations goals and targets for maintenance on an annual basis, and then council can essentially decide whether or not these need to be changed or adjusted accordingly. This is a key communication piece, device in establishing future priorities for maintenance requirements, and in essence, a living document, as annual requirements will vary with demands for growth, weather, and conditions, etc. So we have three different level of service documents currently. We have our winter maintenance level of service, which does concurrently tie into the summer operations level of service, and then we also have an ASB level of service that we look at annually. So as far as previous council direction, council approved the budget for 2023 through the operational services during their deliberations in late 2022. So this level of service reflects essentially a subsequent year of essentially operational services. For the LOS history, council approved the original Public Works level of service in July of 2021 after several workshops and strategic discussions. And then this was later approved in 2022, was the first one for several councilors here for the corresponding operational year, which was 2022. The level of service represents each of the calendar years that essentially operates in. The winter one does a bridge between 2 years, but this one is specifically for our summer services. Just a little background information on this. Establishing the level of service for the county has not been a small undertaking. We work on this, and we've reviewed this document extensively and done some we've cleaned it up quite a bit here in the last little while as well. It does basically lay out all of our specific operations pieces and then provide some tables essentially so the public can actually see what those specifics are. So for our classification section, for the majority of our gravel roadways, which is our largest asset, we've broken that down into class 1, 2, and 3 as far as maintenance activities. And then of course we also have the haul road network, which we have further kind of triaged as far as the operational requirements. So as this is a living document, council can make changes to this at any given time, and we can bring this forward for any operational changes that will essentially affect what that budget requirement potentially is, whether that is the budget is going to be in a deficit position, or the approved budget is in a deficit position, or potentially will be in a surplus position. So this is our best estimate for what the level of service cost will be for this given year, and this has been adjusted significantly from last year. We've seen over a 5% increase across the board as far as some of our operational costs, a lot of that being touched on previously by finance, being fuel and parts costs, as well as we are seeing the capital cost portions now going to be reflected more into this document as well, because the cost of equipment has gone up exponentially as well. So my recommendation for today is to consider adoption of the 2023 level of service policy for public works maintenance. And my reasoning behind that is basically this document ensures the stability and direction of services to the stakeholders of Lethbridge County.
Thank you, Jeremy. I'd open it up to council for questions. Go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So Jeremy, just on your maps, the little red areas, are they county pavement that we're responsible for?
The little red marks.
So like, for instance, off of Highway 508, the one going into Taylor Business Park,
that would be ours.
and that little park that used to be Highway 508 that goes to the railroad tracks and goes nowhere, that's ours too? Oh,
Yes.
okay.
Sorry, I'm pulling up some of these.
Oh, that's okay. Chair, or Devin answered the question. so.
Okay. Any other questions for Jeremy? Lauren, go ahead.
Thank you again. So is graveling included in this, or is this a separate item? How does graveling fit into levels of service?
Yes, graveling is considered as part of this level of service document. We have specifically on page, and excuse me if I mix up the numbering that you have versus what I have essentially for this, but if you can refer to this document that I've got up on the computer, we have culverts, road construction and rehabilitation, gravel pits, which is a portion of ours, and then we have our grading and graveling activity here. So yes, graveling is contained within here. The graveling frequency you can see on the far right hand side of this table over here, where we have our priority 1 classification on a 1 to 3 year frequency, or 2s on a 3 to 6, and then on our priority 3 roadways 6 to 10. Just to clarify, the class, or we have a classification 4, which we just consider undeveloped road allowances. They need to fall somewhere within here, but it's not something that we maintain.
Thank you, Jeremy. Any other questions? Claus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll move that council consideration for adopting the 2023 level of service policy for the public works maintenance.
Thank you, Claus. Claus is moved to adopt the 2023 level of service policy for public works maintenance.
And maybe we add the next line to that one too?
If you want.
Yeah, so this will be the basis for the budget estimated for the 23 operations.
Thank you, Claus. Any further discussion? Claus has moved the adoption of the 2023 level of service policy for public work maintenance. This will be the basis for the budget estimated for 2023 operations. Any further discussion? Call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you very much, council.
Maybe, Jeremy, if you want to just stay there for a sec, I'll let you touch on this first one, maybe. If that's all right.
Sure.
We'll move down now into our correspondence. So as you see, we have a number of pieces of correspondence before us today. I'll start off on item F1, Minister of Transportation. On February 15th, a letter addressed to the Reeve was received from the Honorable Devin Dreeshen, Minister of Transportation and Economic Corridors. Thank you for your December 15th, 2022 letter regarding Highway 25 from Highway 521 to Highway 526. This is in regards to the paved surface of 19.4 kilometer stretch of Highway 25, reverting this stretch to gravel. As Transportation and Economic Corridors have also received a report on this matter from Municipal District of Taber, the department will now endeavor to revert the entire section of road from Highway 521 to 526 to gravel as soon as feasible. Maybe you want to just add a little context if you could, Jeremy?
Sure. We had conversations with Alberta Transportation Regional Director Darren Davidson here recently, probably over the last couple of years, and this actually even goes further back than that. I remember having these conversations 10 years ago about what was going to be the upgrades or potential upgrades to Highway 25, and Transportation's stance was basically that they were going to leave it as a band surface, and now they're moving into the stage of putting it out for public support or council support to essentially revert this roadway back to a gravel road surface. They have spent a considerable amount of money, and they've looked at all kinds of options for Highway 25, but in their engineering assessments, they basically decided that the best course of action going forward would be to revert that section to gravel. Now, because this is goes across multiple districts or multiple areas, because this is within not just Lethbridge County, it's within the MD of Taber, they've asked for that support essentially from both organizations, because it affects all stakeholders essentially in that area. And just on the map here, you can see this is Highway 521 here. This is banned at 50%, and then everything north of this is is banned as well.
Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd also just like to touch on that is a provincial highway. It's not like we're abandoning it or whatever. They haven't funded it in numerous years, and they have no intention of funding it.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So then, by the tone of this letter, would they leave it as a numbered highway? And would it be sort of like 520 where it's gravel? Or what do you think that, is there any implication you get out of this as to what they would do?
I'm tentative to say what they will, with most provincial numbered highways, they usually stay within the province. I mean, even if they were to revert this to gravel, I would expect they would still maintain it as a numbered highway. They might change the numbering, because most 2 numbered highways at minimum are paved. Lots of 3 numbered highways like 520 are not. But that is circumstantial to the province. There is always a question, or I have the fear whenever they look at these kind of things, is whether or not they're going to try and de-gazette it basically over to the county, and then it becomes our operational roadway accordingly. There is that risk point in this, but that could be a further negotiation essentially at that point, because there is quite a process that usually goes through with that. Actually, in reference to speaking to Highway 520, we've received some recent information that looks like the portion that is gravel that is east of or west of 843. This portion here that is 520 is being considered for an upgrade as well.
Any other comments or questions for Jeremy? Go ahead, Morris.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a comment down there. I had one person approached me, and he was very much opposed to what we supported down there. We supported transportation, whatever is the best for transportation to do with that road, to go ahead with that, and I got a little bit of flag over that one or whatever. However, it's just one person, and then that one person has a son, and he thought we made the right decision. So, but the thing is, the state that road is in now, and I think if they're going to turn it into very decent gravel, because you just mentioned 843, that's quite a bit of gravel, and it's in great shape, great state. They can keep it that way, but the way the potholes are now on that old 25, it's pretty dangerous. So, yes, that's my comment.
Thanks, Morris.
Further to that, currently right now it's banned at 50%. If they revert it back to a gravel road surface, then that ban, I would assume, would be coming off of that roadway.
Thanks, Jeremy. Move down to our second item. Minister of Municipal Affairs received a letter from Minister Rebecca Schulz, and it just speaks to the transition from MSI to LGFF, baseline funding amount for LGFF. The local government fiscal framework will be $722 million in 2024-25. Will increase or decrease at 100% of the percentage change in provincial revenues from the 3 years prior. In addition, operating funding has been increased, doubling the MSI operating budget in 2023-2024 from $30 million to $60 million, and included in the letter was a link for municipalities to access and see where they came out as far as their 2023 MSI allocations. Any questions or comments regarding that? Correspondence? If not, we can move down. Item 3, MP Thomas. We received correspondence from Dallas Newdorf, the constituency manager at MP Thomas's office. MP Thomas is hoping to organize a meeting between MP Thomas and council. Like to meet to discuss the current challenges and opportunities for County of Lethbridge, Lethbridge County. Currently, we are looking to set up a meeting between the 11th and 14th. Evening meetings would also be possible. So I would throw it out to council for your calendars, and if we could relay to Candace a time that might work. We did extend to MP Thomas an opportunity to come and to any of our council meetings. Unfortunately, that didn't work into her schedule. So this is our second best option. So I would open it to the floor. Go ahead, Klaus.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If you want some suggestions for a meeting, I would suggest April 11th, because that is a day that the majority of us are here for the Agricultural Service Board meeting, if we would have it after that.
Any other comments? Is there any days that aren't available within that 11th to 14th?
Yeah, I have,
Go to Eric.
Highway 320 Development Association in Tabor from 10 till noon
On the 11th.
on the 11th.
Candace, is there a day that sticks out that would work best?
Sorry, I was mistaken. We have the Lethbridge Regional Waste Committee meeting, then not the Agricultural Service Board.
Okay.
Sorry.
So afternoon could work at the 11th if that's preferred, but I don't know what time your meeting is.
Well, as long as everyone is relatively open that week, I would put it to Candace to maybe reach out and see what's available for those times, because she was meeting with other councils as well. So, and an invite will follow. Okay, thank you. Moving down, invitation. Fortis, Alberta invitation. This is an invitation received to Reeve Council and Senior Administration to the Coldell Operations Net Zero Building Grand Opening / Waterton Battery Energy Storage System Celebration. This is from Fortis. They have a new facility in the town of Coldell. The RSVP date is April the 6th, and they will be hosting the event on April 20th. So we do have that invitation. Again, if you would like to attend, get in touch with Candace, and she can RSVP on your behalf. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Candace.
It is the same date as our council meeting, so that time may not work for you folks.
All right. Thank you. Moving down, item 5, South Groves Southern Alberta Economic Development Forum. Southern Alberta Economic Development Forum on March 30th in Lethbridge, Alberta. This event will feature a keynote presentation by economist Jack Mintz on the future of Alberta's economy. Also a presentation from economist Todd Hirsch, titled Bracing for Turbulence, Preparing for Economic Discussion. Breakfast, lunch, and breakout sessions. I believe we've already received this invitation through Candace. Again, if you would like to attend, please touch base with Candace, and you can confirm your attendance for that event. Item 6, the Prentice Institute for Global Population and Economy invitation. This conference takes place June 20th to 23rd, 2023 at the University of Lethbridge campus. Registration for the conference will be open in early 2023. On behalf of the Prentice Institute for Global Population and Economy, I'd like to extend an invitation to the Canadian Rural Revitalization Foundation Conference hosting in 2023. Conference will bring together policy, academic, and community specialists from across the country. Any discussion on that item? Again, if you are looking to attend, suggest coordinating with Candace. Item 7, United Way Red Tie Gala invitation. United Way Lethbridge is excited to announce that we are hosting the Red Tie Gala on April 1st, 2023. You have the packages included, or the invitation included, I believe. There are a number of opportunities to partner, to attend the event, also partnership options, individual tickets, all sorts of different options there. Any discussion from council on that item? Go ahead, John.
Anybody in council wanting to attend that? Are we looking for direction for authorization to attend? Because there is a cost associated with it.
That is up to how council would like to proceed. If you would like to, or if you would not.
First find if there's an interest, any interest in attending.
Right. Item 8, Vimy dinner invitation. To Mr. Reeve and members of County Council, you're invited to the 15th Annual Vimy Dinner on Saturday, April 22nd, 23. Extend this invitation to you on behalf of Major Robert Mean, Commanding Officer, 20th Independent Field Battery, and the 1908 League of Military Associations. Tickets are $100 and available for purchase. Tickets are available until Friday, April 14th, subject to availability. The goal of the Vimy Dinner is to showcase the military presence in Southern Alberta and to share some of the traditions of our military heritage with the community. Proceeds from the event go towards the promotion of our veterans, serving military, cadets, their organizations, and our shared military heritage. Again, is there any interest in attending, from members of council, in attending the 15th Annual Vimy Dinner on Saturday, April 22nd, 2023? Morris, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Myself, I booked a table of 8 already, and I still have room on that table, so, but, that's up to whoever.
Thank you, Morris. Anything further from council on that one? If not, we can move down to item 9, Link Pathway Committee invitation. On March 8th, 2023, we received from the Link Pathway Society, on behalf of the Link Pathway Committee, I would like to extend an invitation to Lethbridge County Council to have a representative sit on the committee. The Link Pathway Committee meets once a month. You're free to send a representative of your choosing from council or from staff. We hope you consider our invitation. Look forward to working with you on the Link Pathway project. Sincerely, Chair Henry Doobie. How would council feel about supplying either a member of council or a staff member to the Link Pathway Committee? John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Given that once this link pathway is completed, the maintenance and operations of it falls on behalf of the county, I think it would behoove us to have some representation on the pathway committee, if for no other reason than to come back and report to council on the status of it and where it's at with operations, and to make sure that the county's interests are at least spoken and represented on the committee.
Thank you, John. Any other comments from council? Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Similar sentiment. I was quite happy to see the request come in, and I undecided whether it be staff or council, as staff can provide some of the technical on what the county could be looking for, so undecided on that part.
Go ahead, Klaus. And then Lauren.
I think it would be appropriate to have a council member on there, because I think that they could report back to us, and if technical stuff that could be done by the staff, we could also introduce that to staff.
Go ahead, Lauren. Thanks, Klaus.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, given the fact that the majority of the pathway is in the county, I think it would be best to have a member of council and a representative from staff attend.
Is there anyone from council who would be interested in sitting on the Link Pathway Committee? Go ahead, Morris.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, that pathway, it's been pretty dear to me, and I would like to sit on it, but not by myself. I would like to see, I think it's appropriate that at least 3 councillors would be on that committee. We're gonna be quite a bit involved with that pathway, and that's my thinking.
Klaus?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would it be appropriate to nominate Mark Sayers, as he lives in that area?
That's a bit of a, I think that's a bit of a stretch. Larry, could I maybe ask for some input from a staff perspective, as far as, I know staff has been actively involved, but not necessarily at a monthly meeting level, or maybe you could just inform us on that?
Sure, thanks, Mr. Chairman. That is correct. Actually, in the earlier days, say back in 2015 to 2017-ish, I was actually involved in the meetings. They weren't quite monthly at that point. They were maybe quarterly, something like that, so I would attend. One thing that comes to mind with respect to this invitation too is you will recall one of the key resolve clauses in that 9-point resolution that council looked at again at the last council meeting was that the county, generally I can't remember the wording exactly, but be very involved in the planning throughout. So I think it is appropriate to have representation there. And in their actual invitation, they have said to have a representative. Excuse me. I think we're hearing the sentiment from council that, at least one, possibly more, council representative would be there. My thought would be also to have at least one staff member there typically as well. So, we could reach out to them. I'd like to think that our representative, if we said 2 at minimum, one council member, 1 staff member, they wouldn't, turn us away or anything. So maybe we could pursue it from that perspective if council wanted to choose one or more. We could reach out to them and say, hey, X number of council members would like to participate, as well as a staff member. Are you okay with that? And, go from there, depending on council's preference. But
Thank you, Larry.
you're welcome.
Go ahead, Lauren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, they have 2 representatives from the town of Caldale, so I'm not sure why they wouldn't allow 2 from the county.
Yeah.
Go ahead, John.
If the Pathway Committee was receptive to having 2 members from Rockbridge County sit on the committee, then I would put my name forward for the second.
Go ahead, Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So nobody made a motion yet to have 2, right? Nobody did yet. My motion is going to be then that we have 3 councillors on that committee.
Okay. I will not support that motion. So Morris has moved to appoint 3 members of council to sit on the Link Pathway Committee.
And there's staff, right?
So, sorry, Lauren?
I was just going to ask, does that mean 4 people altogether?
I said 3 councillors
And a staff.
and a staff.
3 councillors and a staff member. Go ahead, Klaus.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. If we're gonna stack the committee there, I don't think it's appropriate that we come with that many people. I can't support that.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in regards to having a staff member of administration sit on that, appreciating that this is a volunteer committee, and I'm assuming that the meetings are going to be in the evenings. I think that as a council, we should give some consideration to the fact that our staff has their daily operations that force them, well, maybe bad word, but they have to be here during the day, and to then suggest that the staff member will have to put in extra effort in the evenings, maybe asking a bit more than we should be asking of them. And I don't know, this might be something that they wish to volunteer, or whether there is an overtime commitment that we have to take into consideration in terms of payment. Because as counselors, we get our reimbursement based on the fact that, yes, we are going to attend these, and some of them are definitely evenings. So something that we may want to actually consider.
Larry, I would maybe put it to you for a sec in that regard.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Again, it's been a few years now, so things have changed, and obviously the whole concept of development of the pathway has evolved significantly since that time. Back then, however, the meetings were daytime meetings. What they are now, I'm not sure if anyone, council or admin, is aware of how they're held. One thought I had is, with this invitation, and given, there's lots of, kind of discussion and thoughts about this, before maybe making any decisions today, we could easily reach out, find out, when the meetings are, determine if they indeed are monthly, how long the meetings might be, where they might be, what their thought is about the county having, multiple or several people forward, given that it is, the pathway is in Lethbridge County, and then maybe just bring it back probably at the very next council meeting. We do have a 3-week gap here between council meetings, so I'm sure with ease we could gather that information, report back to council, and allow council then to maybe just have more information and make an informed decision. It's a thought or an option.
Thank you, Larry.
You're welcome.
Eric?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can't support putting a motion that we're going to dictate how many go on there. I'd like to see something of a request from council that we could potentially have 2. And if staff's been in contact, as in our meetings, when we need extra expertise, we put out a request for expertise. If the county is willing to provide this expertise or what our direction is, that can be worked through daytime. This, as far as I can read into it, it is a request to sit on the board. This is a voting position or so 2 would be the max I'd be comfortable requesting, or just conveniently accepting their invitation and going from there.
Go ahead, John. Oh,
Just a comment there, it might not be a voting position, because some boards don't allow municipalities to vote.
Thank you. I guess maybe I'll put this to Councillor Zeenstra. Would you be willing to, withdraw your request or your motion in exchange for an ask of the committee of whether we could have 3 people sit on the board, and then we address this at our next council meeting?
Yeah, thank you for that comment, and my reply is absolutely not. It goes mostly through the county down there. We've been quite involved on there, and here the town of Colville, they'll have 2 on down there, and their involvement was somewhat, but ours as a county was quite intensive, and I would like to keep my motion stand. However, that's up to the rest of the meeting.
Thank you. My thought process behind that is, rather than put something forth and do a resolution today that may or may not pass, and with the thought process that from the link pathway point of view, that this may be viewed as us, as the Lethbridge County Council, trying to shove something down their throat, that we do a request of them saying that this is what we would prefer and we would like to have, and then get a buy-in from them before we arbitrarily say this is the number we want.
thank you, John. Yep, there's a motion been made. Morris has made that made a motion that 3 members of council plus a staff member be committed to the Link Pathway Committee.
Just a question, do you know of how many people are on the committee now? Do you know?
As well, apologize through the chair to Councillor Hickey. I'm not certain, no.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I will, again, Morris has made a motion that 3 members of council plus a staff member be committed to the Link Pathway Committee. I'll call a question. Those in favor? Opposed? That is defeated. Both of you, yeah. Go ahead, Eric.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion that council request 2 people to sit on the Link Pathway Society and report back by next meeting.
For some, and with additional information.
And with additional information. People, councilors, sorry.
I was thinking request 3, but I can look at 2.
Okay, Eric, could you restate that, please? Sorry.
County council would like to request 2 councilors to sit on the Link Pathway Committee, plus administration to bring additional information.
So Eric has moved to direct administration to reach out to the Link Pathway Committee and request 2 members of council be considered for their Link Pathway Committee, and that administration bring back further information to our next council meeting. Go ahead, Lauren.
Just a question, Mr. Chair. So in the letter you're sending to Link Pathway, would you explain why we want the 2 people? Because of the pathway is located within the county? That's all I'm. Good. Thank you.
Okay.
Friendly amendment.
Any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Moving down to item G, County Council and Committee updates. Lethbridge County Council attendance update, February 2023. Start in Division 1. Lauren?
Nothing really to report. Attended County Council and FCSS and a couple of Green Acres functions. But the Green Acres is holding a strategic planning session in May, and I think there may be a couple of changes coming, but I'm not sure exactly what they will be yet. So haven't heard anything on their requisition for what it will be for the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Move to Division 2. I would say the highlight for February for myself was February 14th to 16th. I traveled to Ottawa as part of a Travel Alberta Ottawa trade mission on behalf of Travel Alberta and Exhibition Park. We hosted an event as a group from Southern Alberta here on the Tuesday night. That was very well attended to try and promote Southern Alberta and promote the new agri-food trade center, agri-food hub and trade center. The following day we attended the FCC conference on Canadian Agriculture Day. Again, had a presence at that show. It was very interesting content within the actual conference itself. It was also afforded the opportunity to attend question period. That was very eye-opening as well. Overall, it was a very well-executed trip, and a big thank you to Travel Alberta for providing the funds for us to travel on that and to advocate on behalf of Southern Alberta. I think one of the comments that was loud and clear from people in Ottawa was that they appreciated us coming east. I think there's a bit of back and forth that we feel maybe we're ignored out here, but I think that then it behooves us to make that effort and head to Ottawa and do this kind of work. I think we were very well received. So again, thank you for everyone that put the work in for that. On the 28th, Larry and I met with William Wang, the director of Alberta's China offices. William was very prepared and very well educated on Lethbridge County, had a lot of, you could tell, very educated questions for Larry and I that we had to work to get the answers to. He came very well informed. William had a similar role with the Saskatchewan government, now moving over to Alberta. And his main goal is to connect Chinese investors looking to invest in Alberta, as well as finding market opportunity for products produced here in Alberta, get those into the Chinese market. And I think Mr. Wang really emphasized the need for his role to kind of extract himself from the political side of things and focus on those relationships and that economic side of things. That relationship between China and Canada and other, obviously, nations is a bit stressed. And I just wanted to emphasize his desire to work for the economic betterment of Albertans. On the 28th, Larry and I met and staff met with Mayor Van Ryn from the town of Coaldale and their admin to go over some infrastructure going on in our 2 municipalities and the need to work together and advocate the province to try and help secure some funds to get those projects up and going. And it was just nice to, again, touch base and make sure that our teams are working in unison. With that, I would I guess I'll read Mark's. February 2nd, the Lethbridge County Council meeting. The 16th, he attended the RMA Asset Management Workshop. and the 22nd, the Coldell Chamber of Commerce AGM. Division 4, John?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Other than our regular meetings, I attended the RMA Asset Management Workshop, which was a very good workshop, well presented, and gave us some good insight into the world of administration and asset management and the challenges associated with the same. On February 17th, I had the honor of stepping in on behalf of our Reeve because he could not attend to the Emperor of Japan's birthday celebrations, which was a very good event. We made some good connections with some of our MLAs while we were there, and also as a result of that, we made some connections with some individuals that would be interested in taking a tour of the county, and in that regard, I would like to formally invite them on behalf of the county to come and take a tour of the area in the summertime when the weather is good, but I'll leave that to the sensibilities of the rest of council that we certainly should look at and discuss. I think that there are some good opportunities to increase our exposure and our presence, and also understanding that Japan is one of our largest trade partners in terms of our agricultural products. So, and that would be it for me.
Thank you, John. Division 5, Eric?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. February 7th and 8th, Alberta Irrigation Districts Association Conference, 2-day conference in Calgary. Quite encouraging to see what the irrigation vision is, what the plans are. Of course, it was province-wide, so a lot of talk on sustainability and new areas. Lots of optimism, room for growth, with the caution of sustainable, that we don't run into a shortage, a long-term shortage, and cut ourselves short. So, good conference overall. February 16th, the RMA Asset Management, also very informative. It was good to see how dealing with even our roads as an asset, and how to juxtapose wants, needs, ratepayers, and to put it into charts, and that you could really lay it out quite easily. So I was very, very impressed with it. And February 17th, the Highway 320 Development Board meeting.
Thank you, Eric. Division 6, Claus.
So, other than the county council meeting, we had a SAWA board meeting. And basically, we're just moving on with IZH, with the partner that we found to go ahead with SAWA, and it'll probably take about 3 to 6 months to get an MOU together with them to decide what we're all going to be doing. So that's what we're doing right now.
Thank you, Claus. Division 7, Morris?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Alberta Irrigation District Association Conference was a really good conference. There was a lot of talk, like Eric says down there, about expansion in all the irrigation districts pretty well. And the other comment I would like to make, it was obvious to all the joining municipalities in the irrigation down there how much importance they can see in irrigation in southern Alberta. I think the attendance of a lot of the other municipalities was unbelievable big, and I think we should not forget that, how important irrigation is to our county. And I also attended the Ag Expo and did whatever.
Did whatever? Were you a dignitary anymore?
Thank you, Morris.
I was a dignitary.
Thank you, Morris. With that, we've come to the end of the public portion of our meeting. We do have that one addition to the agenda, a closed session item. Item I-1, infrastructure project discussion, FOIP section 24, advice from officials. John?
I'd like to move that we enter closed session.
John has moved to enter a closed session. Any discussion? Call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you.